Milwaukee in the bag. That brings us to, if we're going alphabetically, Grant, who?
The Philadelphia 76ers,
Look
because
at you.
PHI is before PHO. I'm 3 for 3. Look out. What do they do with James Harden's contract? Like that's my big question. Like that should be the only. I don't know what matters more for the long term and short term future of this team. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but I am bearish on James Harden's future as a productive and helpful component of a winning NBA operation, both because of his on-court play and his just long history of not giving a shit and not being happy or trying hard on teams that he gets himself traded to. So the options are he can opt out, sign a 5-year, $270-ish million deal. He can opt into his $47-ish million salary for next year and extend for 223 over 4 years, or he can sign for less than that. What the Sixers do, how much less than that they can retain James Harden for, because I think they sort of have to keep him. That's the make or break thing for me. I just don't, under no circumstances can they do the 270, and under no circumstances can they pay him the max over 4 years. Like not even close, not even close. I don't care how pot committed they are. They got to get that number down. And if his move is to say I'm opting in and leaving, fine. Like that to me is preferable to paying him the max over like any multi-year scenario.
Yeah, I will say Daryl Morey did call James Harden basketball Jesus. So if there's someone in the league who might give him the full
Yeah.
boat, it could potentially be Daryl Morey.
Yep. He's the only guy, by the way. He's the only guy that would do it.
Is there like, so we know James Harden has to stay. Is there a preferable, or rather, what's the most preferable outcome for the Sixers at this stage? Is it he opts out, and then it's sort of the Chris Paul situation where he's guaranteeing himself more money over the longer term, but he's signing at a per year annual rate noticeably low, below his max? Is it him just opting in and you extend him lower off that number? Is it him just opting in as an expiring contract, saying we come back to the table next year when we see how those hamstrings are, how you look? And there's obviously the alternative is just like, is it just a shorter term where it's not even the Chris Paul, where it's you walk away and it's like it's in between the max and something egregious where you're still paying him a boatload, or a shorter term deal, even where the salary is inflated, but there's the shorter term commitment there.
So for me, I don't know if he gets there. I guess you would technically have to opt out to do this. If I'm the Sixers and I'm not Daryl Morey, first of all, if I'm the Sixers and I'm not Daryl Morey, I don't have James Harden on my team to start with. But if that's the situation I'm in, I want him to opt out, and I'm gonna push an offer across the table that's like 3 for 90, and there's partial guarantees on the third year. And even that is just like feels like it might be too much, honestly, with the trajectory that he's on. But that's about where I'd stop. And if his response is I'm going to take my 47 million and I'm pretty confident I can go somewhere else and find 43 over the next couple of years, so I'm not going to sign this, then fine. He's going to risk getting way less than that if he continues to perform poorly and not be in good shape and quit in big moments. Like this is all in the record now. It's a lengthening track record of what's been happening with him. So I don't know how much confidence realistically he should have that he can do better than a 3 for 90-ish type of deal, even with the partial guarantees. Or you can put escalators on it if you want, like if he plays X, if they reach X round of the playoffs, or if
It has
he
to be
hits certain
tied to his
numbers.
average in or performance in elimination games. That's the best.
Yeah, he's got to have at least a 30% usage and a 60% true shooting in any elimination games they play to collect a penny. That's what I would do.
I think to wrap this up, because I knew you were going to pick this question since it needs to be the question. I didn't pick this question. I think I would prefer if there was a way, or not a way, if he's opting out and you're restructuring the entire deal on a lower per year number to where you might be immediately, can you open up? Is it easier to open up the full mid-level exception, have the BAE as well? Maybe that still involves moving Tobias Harris and breaking up that contract. There's also been floated that Daryl Morey is going to go star hunting again. And in theory, you haven't traded away all your picks. and you do have that Tobias Harris salary, that's just what leads me to my next question. You are obliterating any chance you have at functional depth at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to see how they flesh out the rest of this roster. Not receiving two things that are probably not received, or a bunch of things. I know we talked about how they lost Andre Drummond in that Harden trade, and he was really good for them. Look at what the backup center position became. How much are you still going to invest in that? I guess Andre Drummond's proof you could find quality backup 5 minutes on the cheap. Okay, fine. Danny Green just tore his ACL, and now I have to assume that they're going to waive his non-guaranteed contract. He was the only 3-and-D wing on the roster. Matisse Thybulle might be the most overrated player in the NBA right now. And maybe he's not, because I think we saw how much the Sixers understand that he can't give you anything on offense. I personally think he's marginalized even further on a team where when you play around James Harden and even Joel Embiid to some extent, like you're not looking at all this off-ball movement. And everything is very much happening on the ball or in the direct action. That's not to say, I guess, you can't sprinkle things in. Is Doc Rivers the coach to do that? That's another issue. You lost Seth Curry, super important to the way your offense was functioning. You still have Tyrese Maxey, but like, where are you allocating your best spending tool? Whether that ends up being the bigger MLE or is it the mini MLE? Is this even a situation where you can afford to give one? Like, could you give the mid-level exception to one player, or do you so desperately need to maybe break that up somehow? If it's the mini mid-level, that's just a non-starter. But if it's the bigger one, how are you spending that? And what is your biggest need? Because we could talk about how it's stupid to invest any sort of equity in a backup big when you have Joel Embiid. He's going to miss time. And so if you had the opportunity to get a Chris Boucher and it cost you a chunk of the bigger mid-level or all of your is that something that you could instantly say no to? I'm just very curious to see how they flesh out the rest of their roster on the margins. I'm not saying they can't do it well, because there are some, again, the getting Andre Drummond last year is good proof of that. Everyone loves B-Ball Paul, who's there right now, except for Doc Rivers, apparently. And then even Maxey, getting him so low in the draft, this front office or this team has shown that it can hit in certain instances, but they're just, unless you restructure Harden's pay rate or you have just something like an ace in the sleeves, they just feel like they're so strapped in what they're going to be able to do versus the number of things that they need to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. The guys they go get need to do need to cover a lot of bases, right? Because of their no 3-and-D wings. They don't have quality backup depth up front, which they need both, obviously. So just looking around, and look, these are going to be minimum type guys, but Juan Toscano Anderson can kind of guard 5 positions, can kind of be your super small center, has hit threes occasionally. That's a suspect part, but he's going to give you the defense, and you might also be able to shoehorn him in for 8 minutes a game at center if you had to. Maybe not in a playoff series, I don't know, or maybe in a playoff series when things downsize. Are you going to go? It's let's see if Joe Ingles is going to be okay for the last 4 months of next season. Could he help us on the minimum? I don't they're going to really have to do some scraping, because they just, there's a lot of holes. They're not deep at all. They've got just a lot of guys. Tybulle's a perfect example of, he's fine in the regular season, I think, or useful. You can find uses, but in the playoffs, I think that's someone they should look to trade. See if there's a team out there that's young, that is, an OKC or a Detroit or whatever, that's well, we'll teach this guy to shoot. We'll just take the potential and give you back someone who's slightly more useful in a situation where you have to be able to do more than just play off-ball defense. There are some ways to do it, but it's going to be tough.
They should be an Amir Coffey team. He was quietly really good for the Clippers. And I thought about Nick Batum also from the Clippers, said he wanted to play with Joel Embiid, and there seems to be some quid pro quo there based off what Nick Batum re-signed for. And now they have his early bird rights, they can pay him. But they got Norman Powell, PG and Kawhi, you extend Rocco. Do you need Nick Batum as much? I mean, maybe if you're planning on moving Marcus Morris, that's someone who I think would help the Sixers a bunch as well. But I'm fascinated by this offseason because of there's so much they need to do that I don't even know how they come. And the Danny Green injury, I think, just throws them completely off tilt, because that was a spot where you could be like, hey, we guarantee him at his $10 million salary, and at least we know what Danny Green brings. That is gone. That's just gone.
Well, next year at this time, when we're talking about what 36-year-old Wes Matthews did for the Sixers, we'll know how this offseason went.
Might also be talking about Joel Embiid's trade request at that point.
We very well might.